Yeah, sounds good. Where are you based? In the Netherlands? Near Amsterdam. Okay.
Okay, let's start. Welcome to my session about digital sovereignty and container-based abstraction layers in private and multi-cloud. My name is Gerd. I'm VP Cloud Solutions with Cloudflight. I will talk today a little bit about digital sovereignty and the massive shift that's currently taking place in the market and why it is taking place and what this means for technical solutions. I will talk about the technical solution as well, or a proposal for this, and I brought a demo as well, so for a fully automatic deployment, and then we would have some time for conversational discussion. When you think about digital sovereignty, let's say many of the organizations or companies have quite abstract or academic approach. So what is the definition of digital sovereignty? That they could independently, securely, and autonomously deploy systems and manage their data and their processes. In real life, this looks a little bit different. One of our customers, one of the biggest banks in Germany, is under heavy regulation, and they have, like every big company, risk management. A lot of these risks is on their radar. For example, data sovereignty is related to laws, and many of the foreign laws, for example, for American companies, are not relevant at the end in the EU sector, because American companies will always comply to American laws, not necessarily to the European ones because of their location and where they are located. You might have noticed this at the end of last year or the beginning of this year. There was a massive shift in the geopolitical area as well. So foreign clouds tend to expose risk because the law could change massively, the policy shifts could be there, and this could be a risk. 2 days ago, nobody had thought this, but now the thought is totally different. So this is important for these companies as well. And using just one single cloud provider or services from specific cloud providers might be an ecosystem dependency, a massive ecosystem dependency as well. So it's also thinking about various cloud providers, using multiple cloud providers, not a single one. But what is very important for the organizations nowadays is regulatory tightening. The bank is already under regulation. So for example, DORA, on the left-hand side, requires already every financial organization, or at least the banks in Europe, to be ready to exit one cloud provider. Imagine that. Exit from one cloud provider to another one. It's already active. So the bank needs to be in a situation where it could switch cloud provider. How could this happen? There are other regulations coming up, like NIS2, for example, considering that the dependency on a single provider or the technology is a cybersecurity risk. So every responsible person would be required to tackle this. And there will be 2 other regulations upcoming. It's currently in negotiations that would make it harder for foreign companies, for example, cloud providers in Europe on one side. On the other side, they might push for a Buy European initiative. So this will change the picture a little bit when it comes to digital sovereignty. If we talk with our customers, it's not about digital sovereignty, it's more about a specific view on this. So some companies, they are more interested in where is my data located, where is the access to the data. Some other companies, they look at this from an operational resiliency perspective. We need to operate ourselves today and tomorrow as well. The manufacturing sector, for example, is more interested in the supply chain. And cloud provider or IT provider is a provider in the supply chain as well. They do this since decades for their technical sector, for their products and stuff like this. Now they do this for their IT services as well. Will my cloud provider available tomorrow as well? So it's a very diverse picture if you talk about digital sovereignty. And this has an impact on the technical solution as well. So at the end, it's digital sovereignty on one side, but it's the capability to switch from one cloud provider to another one in a very short period of time. And it's resiliency. I want to operate my services on the cloud. If something happens, whatever the reason might be, I want to do the same tomorrow because my business model can't wait for this. This is true for banks, critical infrastructure, big companies, you name it. So at the end, there are multiple aspects that are relevant for a solution as well. So from the customer's perspective, they have cloud providers meeting the regulatory requirements, but they need alternatives as well. Many of them are using hyperscalers, which is totally okay, but they need another cloud provider as well. It could be a hyperscaler or another European cloud provider, for example. They have standard services already running, applications for their business model. They need to be standardized and available on all of these cloud providers as well. And they want to use innovative services as well, like OpenAI or other AI services from the hyperscalers. And they have the requirement to switch from one provider to the other one very quickly. But at the end, they don't want to pay, obviously, they don't want to pay multiple times for the same implementation. They want to pay the best way only once and then use multiple cloud providers. So a system that could support this as a solution needs to be able to deploy to many cloud providers on one side. On the other side, provide the support, the compliance support that is required for the banking, for manufacturing, or other sectors. Standardization is very important, especially for the lines of business software they are using and the other softwares. The chance to move from one cloud provider to another one, and at the end have one system that could be used for all the other deployments as well. We had a look at the competition in this market, and obviously hyperscalers around the world are American or Chinese companies, and they offer everything from bottom to the top. So they have the infrastructure and convenience level applications like PaaS, SaaS, and a lot of other stuff. That's their advantage. If you look at the European market, there are a lot of smaller cloud providers, and there are some, I would call them superscalers, so they are already on the way to a hyperscaler, but it's not necessarily 100% comparable. We just randomly selected some cloud providers to have an impression what is available on the market, what is it that we could use if we want to create a system that should help us in with digital sovereignty. And if you look at this from an IaaS level, it's very comparable. Basic SaaS like IAM, service logging, monitoring, observability, that's available as well. What is interesting for us, every cloud provider provides managed Kubernetes. That's a very good technology that we could use. In other areas, for example, container services, serverless computing services, not every provider has this in their portfolio. But databases and all this stuff is available as well. So from that perspective, they are in the middle somewhere between the basic cloud providers and the hyperscalers. So our idea was, how could we propose or how could we provide technology to these customers that are interested in using different cloud providers and don't want to reinvent the wheel again and again and implement just with one cloud provider with the other one, without the option to move from one provider to the next one. So the basic requirement is we want to deploy to all of these cloud providers. So we want to use probably Azure, for example, because of the local scale, OVH, for example, or Stackit, or whatever. There could be other logos or names as well. At least as long as they provide the required basic infrastructure and the basic services we want to use. What we deploy then is a management cluster, Kubernetes management cluster, providing the management of the underlying cloud infrastructure. It manages the infrastructure that is required to deploy the other services, some level of operational support, management systems, services, observability, and whatever might be required. And it provides the deployment automation as well. And as you have seen on the slide before, Kubernetes is available everywhere. So you can do this potentially on every one of these cloud providers. There are multiple technologies available to do this. So Crossplane, for example, or the new kid on the block is Cordon from Mirantis. Kamaji would be an option, maybe others as well. So there are different systems available on the market to implement this. We are currently using a mixture between Crossplane and Cordant, depending on the use case. That works very well, actually. And then we deploy managed clusters on the other platforms, on the other cloud platforms, whatever the platform might be. For example, you might have a managed cluster on Microsoft Azure because you want to have global scale, or you want to have connection to the services from Microsoft Innovation Services, for example. Or maybe the organization is interested in focusing more on sovereignty and specific data they want to host in a European cloud provider. Then this would be possible with the deployments to these other providers as well, or the managed clusters on these cloud providers. So the system provides all the necessary abstraction layer to all of these cloud providers. What is important in this context is to standardize the deployments. So we start on the infrastructure layer because the providers are different. Your abstraction layer looks a little bit different. There are management groups, for example, in Azure. This is not as this concept is not available on OVH, for example. So you have to create something. If you want to use this, you have to create something to abstract this away. Connection to other clouds, we do in this context as well. On the platform layer, we have services we deploy to multiple platforms like security and compliance, or core systems, observability services, and other stuff. So this is available on multiple clouds or required to manage these clouds. And on top, we have application stacks, like an IoT platform, for example, or an AI platform. You could imagine there the lines of business software as well. As long as we can put it in a container or deploy it in Kubernetes, it needs to be abstracted away and needs to be standardized as well. And as an example, we have ThinkSport on the right-hand side, for example. It's a complete deployment that would look the same on every cloud. You could even deploy it over multiple clouds, spanning multiple cloud providers. And it might connect to another AI service, for example, or the other services that are deployed on the given cluster or the given cloud platform. The templating behind this is important. The systems are different. So this is more the cross-plane example. In Cordant, it would look a little bit different. But at the end, it's comparable. So you have an API, you define the API and the schema behind it, the version, the variables you want to use, and you have a template. And this template defines the underlying basic infrastructure you want to use, the dependencies, and all the other necessary stuff, like connection details, for example. And you have the option to integrate your own source code, scripting or something like this, if you want to include functions like you need to prepare an environment or a service somewhere else in your cloud or in another cloud, and then you want to deploy these resources, or you want to ask a software, get data from, you want to ask a database, you want to get data from a database before you start the deployment or during the deployment, and you could do this in the functional area as well. And if this is done, the CI/CD system or an engineer triggers the CI/CD system and would request this resource, and the instance would be started. And depending on the template, it would deploy all the necessary underlying infrastructure or services, whatever you require. This is very simplistic, so the developer creates this request, the system provisions everything. If the developer would change the configuration, then it would automatically change the deployed systems or the resources. Even if someone would manually change something on the web GUI, the cloud provider level, for example, the system would revert this automatically because it detects the drift. And at the end, the developer probably would delete the request, and then the whole system would be teared down. So with this approach, it would be possible to deploy standardized stacks on one cloud provider or multiple cloud providers deploying stacks over multiple cloud providers with resiliency and reliability. And you could connect to external services as well, and these could be diverse, could be everything that lives on other cloud services, for example, or even on-prem. This system could deploy to on-prem as well, as long as it's a supported cloud system, OpenStack or whatever. And it makes it very flexible, so you could switch from one cloud provider to another one, at least from the deployment level. If you think about data, then it could get more complex, at least for companies with a lot of data. We discussed this with a bank. For them, it's a minor problem because they have 95% of the data on the on-premise anyway. But for the data that gets processed in the cloud, it takes time. And this could be an issue if you want to switch from one cloud provider very, very fast. But anyway, there are solutions available as well. As I already mentioned, I brought a demo as well. So this system will automatically deploy an IoT platform, an LLM, a ROC system as well, retrieval augmented generation, and a chatbot, workflow engine, monitoring, logging, security, and compliance scanning. And the system normally does automatic disaster recovery as well, but the demo is very long, so I cut this off from the demo. So this is the management cluster. This is the OVH interface, the web GUI from OVH. The management cluster is already running. And now we will configure the system. So it will deploy a database cluster, and you can configure all the supporting services here, the version, the size, some other characteristics as well. It will deploy an IoT cluster as well, with Fixport in this case, all the necessary databases and services inside of the standardized deployment, and an AI and N8N cluster as well. Support for Oyama and OpenWebUI and an N8N. So we will push the commit to the repository. And this will start the deployment. In this case, the deployment targets OVH, but the same system works on Azure, for example, as well, and could be used for multi-cloud deployments as well. So the AI N8N DB cluster, IoT cluster get deployed. The whole deployment for everything that's in this video takes 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, everything is available. So this is the Fixport system after installation. So we have a lot of customers from the manufacturing sector, for example. They use massively IoT and devices as well. This is the monitoring stack. The monitoring covers the dashboard for Trivia as well, that's security and compliance scanner, because it's a demo system. There are a lot of critical findings from the system. You can see in all the dashboards the health state of these clusters. And this is the OpenWebUI for the chatbot. This system has GPU support on OVH, so it automatically configures the GPU as well and the underlying drivers and everything that you need. And I asked now the system to help me with documentation. And this is the workflow engine, and we deployed workflows into the system as well. That's the RUG system we will use, or at least the workflow on the RUG system. The vector database was deployed as well, connected to the systems. So the left-hand part is the workflow for uploading documents. I'm now uploading the sponsor prospectus from the Open Infra Summit to the system. Takes a few seconds. This is the document, so that you have an impression what I just uploaded. And now I will ask the system to tell me more about the options for sponsors with respect to this Open Infra Summit. And the system didn't know anything about the Open Infra Summit before. And there are the results. So again, it's a demo, probably not necessarily the services every company needs, but it shows very easily from my point of view how you could standardize these deployments and make them available in a very short period of time. The requirement is to have Kubernetes clusters or managed Kubernetes clusters on every cloud provider, and put this massive level of standardization and abstraction on this. So having this management cluster, for example, that is able to communicate with the underlying cloud infrastructure and prepare all the platforms and spin up the environments is vital for this. But at the end, you could use these applications and templated applications on every cloud provider. You are flexible and you are not dependent on one single cloud provider. Is this usable for every service? No. So there are some services you can't use, probably companies with a massive dependency on specific SaaS services, for example, that might not work because you can't replace, let's say, ServiceNow or M365 or whatever, just with this deployment. But there are other options as well, or the other way around. Maybe you are on one European cloud provider and you need more scale, then you could move this to the hyperscaler and use their services. So it makes you very flexible in case that the regulation changes or the laws or someone changes the policy in the US and you have to move from one cloud provider to the other one. Again, there are some other impacts, for example, data. If you have 5 petabyte of data on Azure, it might be a little bit more challenging to move the data as well. But the regulation has changed in this area as well. The cloud providers, every cloud provider is required to support the migration and the migration of data as well to other cloud providers and is not allowed to block this. There is kind of a period until 2027, and after this period of time, it's not allowed that the customer would pay for this migration, which is very interesting. So from that point of view, it might be easier in the future as well to move from one cloud provider to the other, even if a lot of data is involved. That's it from my side. Any questions? Any questions?
If there is a prioritization of foreign law, how can you be sure that this law that enforces the cloud provider to allow the data to be removed is enforced?
Again, I didn't get this question.
If you have data on the cloud,
Yes.
which is governed by foreign law, and the foreign law does not guarantee a foreigner the data to be extracted, then you can still be blocked and the data would be lost. It would still be there but not accessible anymore.
That's a problem, yes. So that happened already in multiple cases. One hyperscaler blocked the access of a bank to their data because the bank was under sanction and the data was not available. Okay. And the problem was even the judge who tried to force the cloud provider to open up the cloud again, they didn't react. It took them 2 months to open up the cloud again. Okay. So they were put under force to pay 10 million euros or something like this if they don't open up the cloud again, so that at least the judge could, or the employees of the government could access the data to cover the bankruptcy of the bank. So that was, it already shows you that, it shows you that this complexity of foreign law and European law and the data could create very weird situations. I think it wasn't in the interest of the cloud provider to block the data, but they were required by their law to do it. That was the outcome at the end. And this could happen the other way around as well, to some extent.
Of course.
In the case of directly conflicting instruction, essentially from both sides of the city.
Exactly.
Who wins?
Just imagine the company would be a big company, so relevant for the system. It could inflict a lot of problems between governments.
Basically, the company would have to give up to business in the lesser important area.
And you mentioned DORA, the necessity to have a cloud exit strategy is already in place. In your experience, does anyone actually take this seriously?
Very seriously. The problem is the bank is massively regulated, which means the central banks are checking and auditing the banks in a given country like Germany or France, for example. And after an audit, if they are not compliant, they have to pay fees. They have to pay massive fees. It's a lot of money. And then 1 year later, the central bank will check again and audit this again, or give them a time frame when they have to solve this problem. At the moment, I would describe the situation like there is some room for interpretation with respect to these regulations, but I think, let's say in 1 year, this is over. There is a clear statement in the laws, you have to have an exit scenario. It needs to be tested, validated, and you should be able to do this exit, migration, whatever, whenever it's required. So what is the trigger for it's required? For example, if a law changes or policy in another country or whatever it might be, tariffs, massive tariffs on digital services would be the situation, for example. And from that perspective, it's already in the risk management of many of these companies. But do they have a solution? Some of them, they are working on this. The bank we are working with, they have already very developed point of view with respect to what they want to do, but it's not necessarily implemented. But that's understandable because it takes time, a lot of money, and a proper strategy as well. But at least I think for the banks, they know exactly what will happen. And maybe they are trying not necessarily to put a lot of pressure on this now. There takes a lot of lobbying is taking place as well for the upcoming regulations as well. Because a lot of companies, they don't want to have this necessarily because of, again, a lot of work and a lot of money will be involved into this. But it's already visible.
What about AI? When I take a look at the moment, for example, the toolkit set, Azure is offering for building AI applications, how do you want to change, in a short amount of time to another provider? You don't have a chance at all.
But that's true for a lot of services. So especially big companies, for example, they use ServiceNow or whatever. There are single providers everywhere.
Yeah.
Even if you would take away a lot of services from hyperscalers, for example, the second row, it's the same. So open source is a very good tool to get more room and space for maneuvering, for example. But a lot of companies are from other countries for networking software, for what you could imagine, monitoring software. Big companies, they use single monitoring providers. They use 3 cloud providers on-premise in a data center, but they have only 1 monitoring provider, and it's hosted on Azure. So if you take this away, all the services are down. You could start Excel possibly to try to manage the systems. And that's true from various angles. So this is a longer story at the end. It takes a lot of efforts to do this, but there is already technology available to have some room for maneuvering and think about this for the future, for example. Deploy in the future with flexible systems and use this for your purchase decisions as well. Do I want to use this specific provider? Do I buy a login with this provider, or am I flexible? The banks, for example, they are already building associations or groups of participating banks to replace the biggest services. Obviously, they have a lot of money, so it might work. For other companies, it's super challenging. Mid-sized businesses, manufacturing sector, they can't afford this. At least not a single company or an association wouldn't work for my point.
Take a look at the car industry, for example, in Germany or in Europe. Yeah. How are they dealing with this situation?
I think it's always the same. If you look at this from an IT management perspective and from a risk perspective, you could ask, why didn't they care the last 10 years or 15 years? Forget about cloud, it was the same in traditional IT.
Yeah.
Don't be dependent on a single provider. And I think this cloud-first movement, that was beneficial for the cloud systems or the cloud industry, and that's okay, but they never thought about this. And many customers are super dependent on one cloud provider or one technology. So from that perspective, I think they have to do their homework. And you have seen it in the regulation. It will come. If the whole system is dependent on a few providers or technology providing countries, for example, then this might be a challenge in the future. 98% of all the European governments use foreign technology.
Yeah.
And if you would switch the button, it would be done. And this becomes very, very important because of the changes during the last 1 year, let's say.
Does this regulation also apply to workstations? Because
You mean the operating system and the software you're using on a laptop?
specifically OneCloud? Because I mean, what good would it be if all the backend systems would be secure, but people would lose their personal data, their emails, their phone numbers, whatever they need to operate these systems?
I think that's not the level the regulations look at this. But I could imagine that it's included, but I can't answer.
As you know, there is also already an example for Microsoft blocking out somebody personally.
Yeah.
So this is not considered.
I want to say that it's not considered. I can't say necessarily, because the cloud provider, they are mentioned as core providers. As long as there is cloud involved, it would cover this. I can't say for software that is dominating the market and installed on your laptop. I could imagine it's the same, but I can't say.
And obviously the cloud is not on the laptop, but Office, Microsoft Office, Outlook, that's all front ends to OneCloud. And if the OneCloud is blocked, you're done.
Yeah, that's true.
So as to me, a chicken egg situation. So we are trying to be sovereign, to go into Euro to make those things, but at the same time we are using Microsoft. So my emails, the name of my clients are in Microsoft. So this is something that maybe we need to think to start moving this.
A lot of companies even use Teams as phone service. They will not even be able to call for help anymore.
Exactly.
Thanks goodness we do have mobiles.
Yeah, but that's.
Are you sure the mobile operator is not doing the same thing?
On the other side, hyperscalers provide something that we want to have as well. Global scale. If you think about big conglomerates, they need this global scale. And the European cloud providers, they are working on this, but they are not on the same level at the moment. So from that perspective, I would see this more on an abstract level. You want to be resilient. You the company wants to be independent and wants to have the choice between multiple cloud providers. Which cloud provider is the best one for a given use case? And then there are some very core services, Entra, M365, ServiceNow, specific monitoring systems. So there are a lot of different systems. And maybe we need a more flexible solution, or we need more competitors in the market, or whatever.
You mentioned the keyword Entra ID. Every cloud provider has a connection line to Microsoft for Entra.
Yes.
Every. So when they switch, nothing.
That's true. On the other side, I wouldn't expect Microsoft to switch.
Open
I would expect maybe a situation would be created that
When Donald is
Microsoft
mad,
needs to
if
switch.
you fool him, you don't get your mail anymore.
Yeah, but again, for example, the banks are already working on this. So they want to have the choice to use Entra ID, for example, and to have other systems as well. That's possible. And then maybe on a long-term perspective, there will be more competition in the market or more options. Something like this. There are options in the market, but not necessarily usable for a mid-sized business right out of the box. That's not possible.
If you looked at the numbers, what would happen? I mean, the big cloud providers are all in the US. Now, if the US, from a geopolitical perspective, would the capacity hosted or controlled by US companies would not be available anymore, would the other, specifically the European providers, be able to provide the capacity to replace it?
No.
I would think so. I don't know the numbers.
It's not even close. Just from a power perspective, it's something like
American providers.
it's an order of magnitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's difficult.
And
Because there's a commercial problem in the background, because to make it really reliable, to make the switch possible, the cloud providers would have to over-provision their capacity. They would have to keep capacity on the available in case the demand pops up. Otherwise, it's too late.
it's impossible. So
We need
And who would pay for that?
even
If it's an order of magnitude,
let's
it's impossible to pay for.
let's assume it's not the world, because that's
No,
a very big scenario. Let's
but the
say
US is efficient.
Germany. So the German hyperscaler customers would be required to consume services from a European cloud provider, a German one or a European one. Impossible. It's absolutely impossible. The companies, to get their resources in one cloud provider, need to book them now to use them in 2 or 3 years. Otherwise, they would never get the consumption. The data centers are not there, the space is not there, compute power, whatever. It's just, as you said, an order of magnitude. It's impossible. But that's the important learning curve here from my point of view. If that system doesn't work, it's done. There's no chance. So from a resiliency level, survivability level, I would say, hey, let's work on this stuff. Because it's not about the bad hyperscalers. They did their job perfectly. They have a perfect offering. That's why they are so successful. It's more about the other side. Hey, we need comparable services. We need more compute power, more data centers, more AI, whatever is required. And we need a flexible system. If we would create now a European hyperscaler, and this hyperscaler would have the same size like Microsoft in Europe, let's assume this. What happens if this hyperscaler goes down? You have the same problem. Every company is using this European hyperscaler, and the next day, business is over. Because the system went down, hackers hacked the system, and the whole system is down. A lot of companies, the IT services from a lot of companies, live on hyperscalers. It's another company managing these services. 20 years ago, every company had the servers in their own room. It was not perfect, but they had a lot of control about these services and they could
We were real sovereign.
Yes.
Not really, because you still had suppliers.
Yeah, that's at the end of the day, yeah, but at least if something happens, you can unplug the cables and your data is
Yeah, but I remember these
No,
times,
no.
and basically all of these installations had a modem link up for the support. So it was not completely independent. More than today, of course, yes,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
not completely.
And there's other layers of hyper consolidation as well in the networking space. So Cloudflare, for example. If Cloudflare disappears tomorrow, then 40% of the internet disappears. There's
Yeah.
other issues. other subsets.
Totally.
Equinix.
It's in
Equinix is the same.
Equinix.
in the risk management of the bank, they think about these concentration risks. The combination of multiple risks. What could happen if one risk happens and then it inflicts all the others, triggers all the others? They are really concerned about this. Because on the other side, a bank is system relevant. If the bank goes down, half of the economy in Germany is down.
Yeah, but date 6 is also system relevant.
That's true. Maybe this problem is
90% of internet traffic in Germany run through one building in downtown Frankfurt.
and
It's not
to
true.
some extent it's an American building as well.
How else do they sniff it?
We suffer in Spain the outage of the power. So because everything concentrated. So at the end of the day, there are many risks that we are facing. But there are some countries, Spain is one of them, so everything is centralized. So this internet, this is the power. So we need to try to start splitting this because we are on risk.
And
Sure.
the outage in Spain a few months ago was a very good example. It was a minor problem that initiated the whole situation.
Very quickly.
And it was more even regulation was in space to prevent this,
Yep.
but they didn't protect this regulation, so it wasn't implemented by many power companies. That was the problem at the end. So the law was there, the planning was there, the infrastructure was there, but it wasn't properly configured or handled by some of the power companies. So could happen on multiple levels. But I think it's for the European Union specifically, it's very important to get on another level of resiliency. If a lot of companies, they can't wait for the politicians or the European system to create these regulations. And on the other side, the regulations will bring a lot of responsibilities to these companies as well. So that's why we thought about a technology or a system that helps to get more independent and deploy systems on one cloud provider, maybe the same on another one. If it's already there, I booked my resources already, then I'm very flexible, even if some systems might be lost or some data might be lost. And imagine that you have a bigger outage, like in Spain with the power, or you have an outage with a cloud provider, change in law, and one company would already use this and would use multiple cloud providers. It would be the first company coming up again. All the others are dead, but this company would come up as the first one. And I think that's the thinking we need to have. It's not about all the risks and what could happen probably. It's more about I want to be prepared in case something happens, and then it's a resilient situation. We can survive the situation. Most of the companies, when the economy is challenging already, and now you take them for, let's say for 3 days you would take away M365. They are bankrupt. It's done. So from that perspective, I would say, hey, it's not about the cloud provider, it's not about Microsoft, it's about my IT supplier is relevant for me. It's system, for my system, it's critical. So I need multiple providers and I need to be able to switch them, to replace them, independently from the reason why I want to do this. And obviously, in some cases, this is easy. In some cases, there is no replacement at the moment. That's the problem.
Take a look at SAP. You know, the new version from SAP shall be hosted in the SAP data center. So if that thing goes down, 50% of the companies in Europe are done.
Yeah, in this case, it's a little bit, let's say, bad luck.
They have
SAP was
this
big enough
hyperscale
to become the
future.
European hyperscaler. So it could have been the European
In
hyperscaler.
terms of ERP services,
No, in general, if they would have started to create cloud 10 years ago, it was obvious in the market that cloud would be the upcoming technology. They didn't invest into this, they were not interested in this 10, 15 years ago. It started a little bit later, and then it was very related to ERP and all this stuff. It was not the idea, hey, let's think out of the box, we want to be AWS of Europe. That was not the case, but they had the money. They found this. I think it was the only company with this unique situation, let's say a decade ago or 15 years ago.
And in principle, there's a disparity between politics and market. Because as soon as you have no differentiation in the product anymore, centralization is what the market dictates. But now we have disparity and we don't want the market. The internet is global, but the politics are not global anymore.
Exactly.
So we need to control this by other means than market economy.
And it's kind of
regulation or whatever, but somebody has to pay for it.
The opposite direction as well. The hyperscalers, the offering works perfectly because it's standardized and it's all about scaling factors, the standards and economy as well, globalization. So they can use this to be successful. And if you want to introduce regulation, you're trying to pray a different path, something like, hey, it needs to be separated, not centralized. So you take away the order of magnitude for the scaling factors, for example. And that's somewhat opposite. I think that's one of the challenges as well.
Yeah, that's political or sociological chain reaction. As soon as there is the risk somebody flips the switch, you have to prepare for it. But as soon as you have the means to be prepared for it, somebody will use it. In the long run.
At least, let's say 1 year ago, if you would have asked someone, he would say, no, this will never happen. But nowadays, maybe.
You had the key word on one of your early slides, Trump.
Exactly.
I don't think you
yeah,
were
but it
referring
wasn't
to him by
it
name.
was not the person. So
Coincidentally, I think it's a very relevant issue.
But it's a good example for the situation. So you could create a regulation, you could sign a contract. What does this mean tomorrow?
Potentially nothing.
Potentially nothing.
This has been proven time and time again with the free trade agreements being worth nothing.
That might be okay on a political level, but let's imagine you would be the manager, the top manager in the board of, I don't know, the biggest automotive company in France. So will you trust this situation? Probably not, because you say, hey, my business needs to run tomorrow and the next week and next year.
Yeah.
So I can't trust this contract, probably.
Yeah, but Europe is not perfect, but at least so with the load, we are changing the laws with some common sense. So we are changing the law, we are preparing the law, and it's, we have 2 years in order to be prepared. The problem that is happening with Trump is that he changed the law one day to other. So tomorrow it's going to change. So tomorrow we're going to share to you more money about that. So this is a good thing for us. It's a good publicity that we can attract clients to our cloud providers because of those laws are moving slow.
I would be
very slow. Sometimes very slow.
Totally convinced that the EU does this perfectly on this level, but I look at this from another perspective. Maybe President Trump doesn't respect American laws or laws in general, whatever. I don't care. It's a cool test case. There is this one politician, and he doesn't care. So whatever contract you signed, it might be useless tomorrow.
Yeah.
What does this mean for your IT planning, the services you use, your business model? How do you think about this? We work with a lot of big conglomerates or mid-sized businesses. One company, if you ask one company, they think about this, they see this as a risk, or they want to do something, they don't know exactly what they need to do, it takes a lot of money, whatever. Another big conglomerate, I asked the IT lead of this conglomerate, hey, what do you think about the situation? What is the cloud provider using? Yeah, we are using an American hyperscaler. Okay, what happens? I don't care, that's the problem of my compliance lead. Okay. I don't know if this is a help, but
what happens?
and I think that's the truth for many companies or organizations. They don't care at the moment because they think, no, this will not happen. It's the same. Let's get away from hyperscalers in America and all this stuff. Hackers. We had already a lot of downtimes and outages in cloud provider services because of hacking. Let's assume one hacker is super clever or one group because they work together now, multiple groups, or state hackers as well. And they would just take down multiple clouds or multiple systems. And I think that's what could happen, what is realistic. And even for the bank, they have a lot of power, they have the time and the money to think about this. They are not sure. They try to identify what could be the biggest problem. What is it that we need to cover? How do they overlap these risks, and what does this mean for our technology? And interestingly, in the bank, some departments are resilient. They use open source technology, for example, in CI/CD systems. They deploy fully automatically to multiple clouds. They could move the whole stack to every cloud provider. If you look at the monitoring department, they use one monitoring for all the services, hosted on Azure. Why? I don't know. Maybe there was no centralized strategy or whatever the reason might be, but now they are dependent, independently from the fact that some of the departments did their job. They did this perfectly. They are resilient. They could use even on-premise technology. It's no problem. So somehow they did the job and somehow they didn't. And I think it's more a problem on a management or strategy layer. And it's a bank. Compared to other organizations, they have more money. They could afford to take money to solve a problem. For mid-sized businesses in the manufacturing sector or some other sectors, it's really impossible to create big budgets and solve the problem on their own. That's impossible.
Jaguar recently did for weeks, no manufacturing for months, I think, from a ransomware.
They had to take up a loan for 1.5 billion euros or something like this.
So for
Yeah.
Just to survive,
Yeah,
they had
almost
to
killed
take
them
up money from the
financially.
bank. So it's-
So they had to shut literally no manufacturing at all. They had to obtain financing to bail out their downstream providers, even because they were going to go broke as a result.
Yeah, exactly. So it was
Crazy.
the whole supply chain went down. It's-
It's one ransomware.
And it was this mixture between the technical attack, the results of this attack, and the economic system below this. So I'm down, and suddenly all my suppliers are down as well because I can't pay them anymore, and they might die. And if they die, the technology is gone as well, so I can't revive them. So I can't use this anymore, and I'm done.
Korea is another example.
The
So what
consolidation.
happened in Korea, the Korea government. So
they lost
Yeah,
it.
the Korean example is it was very interesting or very surprising for me because Korea has a very strong regulation. So if you are a responsible person in Korea for management of IT systems, for example, or deployment, and you are not deploying this or confirming this in compliance with data protection and data security, you could go for 1 year in jail. As far as I know, one person committed suicide after this. So it gives you an impression about the impact of strong regulation if something happens and it was not implemented correctly.
yeah.